What is up, everyone? Welcome back to part 2 of why we care about research as sports performance coaches. I don't know if that's actually the title, but I just wrapped up recording part 1 as to why the research is important for us as a performance coach. So if you did not listen to part 1, you should definitely check out part 1. It's not required that you listen to part 1 before part 2, but if you're someone who maybe thought this was interesting, you should go back and listen to part 1. The too long didn't read, right? The synopsis of part 1 was that the research we have can be our North Star. It's the North Star effect of saying, okay, here's the guidance. Here's what someone has spent hours looking at and researching. And I now know that I can take that information and I can absolutely use it to help guide me forward. However, it is not the roadmap. The roadmap is our actual coaching, the actual practical coaching and tangible implementation of the training session. That is the roadmap. The North Star and the roadmap are independent of each other. They can absolutely work independently. However, a collaborative effort between the two is going to work best for us as sports performance coaches. We know this. The research guides our coaching practice. The coaching practice can help, I don't want to say alter the research, but adjust the research to what we need as sports performance coaches. If you are watching this on YouTube, you just saw a lot of hand gestures. If you are listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you enjoy Spotify podcasts or Apple, wherever you enjoy podcasts, you missed out on a lot of hand gestures, but it's okay. Also, just click the subscribe button or the like button. It really actually does help. It actually tells wherever you're listening to podcast, watching it, that this is a live, like active feed. And people are watching it. So it goes a long way of helping just spread the word. So take a second, click the like button, leave us a review, ask a question in the comments, and we can turn it into a podcast episode. What do you think about that? Questions, put them in the comments. Let's go. Okay, so I got the notes in front of me. If you're on the YouTube and you're watching me look down a couple times, it's because I have notes, because I care. Because I care, I need to organize my thoughts about something so robust as translating the science. So part 2, we're talking about translating the science and why it matters. And I think what's important is to just take a step back and look at the role of a coach in what we do. Athletes come to us, teams come to us, coaches, sport coaches come to us because we're a decision maker. And when we're someone who has to ultimately make that decision of what goes into the session, the research is a great guide. Again, right, the North Star effect, but it's not the rule book. Okay, the research is a guide. It's not the rule book. This is where your experience as a coach is really important. Well, I know the research says this is the best, but I have 12 novice level softball players in front of me that have never done a structured speed training session. So maybe I need to just tweak things down a little bit to help layer in some learning. The other thing that the research doesn't necessarily have is coaching feedback loops. Right? We have the ability to provide feedback, take their feedback, interpret, translate, and put it back into the training session. Whereas research is largely pretty rigid as far as here's our thesis. This is what we are researching. When we are implementing the research, we are looking to validate the significance or insignificance of this thesis. So though other things may come up, it's not the focal point of the research, right? So when we're in a coaching session and say we're trying to work on front side mechanics of maximum velocity, well, we may find that it's hard to get athletes into front side mechanics because they're not actually striking the ground under the hip and their foot is early releasing. So we need to actually take a step back and we need to focus on making sure we get even foot strikes under the hip so that we can get into an adequate front side mechanic position, front side position based off of a foot strike that is relative to the hip. Again, on YouTube, lots of hand gestures. On the audio version, you're not getting the hand gestures, people, but it's okay. It's okay. Hopefully that little synopsis there makes sense. So research is a guide. It's not a rule book. And then it's a really important piece to use the research. Again, this kind of maybe recapping, but taking the bridge into translating the science. That is a filter. Okay, so I talked about the 6 different components we look for, we meaning the education team as it relates to the 2 research reviews that go into all access every month. But for you as a coach, you should really have kind of the quick guide, right? The quick, like we say an elevator pitch. If someone's like, hey, what do you do for work? You can explain it in 30 seconds. When you have a training topic posed in front of you or you have research in front of you, you should really look at 3 different things. One, and this is what was mine, so I'm not saying this is what you need to do, but this is what I do. Number 1 is who was studied? Where was it? Was it done with graduate students? Was it done with pro athletes? Was it done with collegiate students at a Division 1, 2, or 3 level? Was it done with adolescents? Does the population match who I actually work with? Because that matters. Number 2 is what problem was solved? And was it a problem, or was it a meta study, or were they trying to validate or expand on research that was done in the past? Because a lot of times you may see a problem being solved that's not relevant to you, or is something that is so finite that you might not even be getting to that to that level. So again, look at the maximum velocity example from a few minutes ago. You might really find that in your coaching practice, the level of athletes you work with, say they're early high school or they're like ages 10 to 15 or something like that. And we know if they're a novice level, a younger athlete, that if we can get them producing force under the hip, if we can get them syncing a contralateral limb relationship between the legs and the arms, and if we can get them to have a little bit faster recovery into frontside position, those 3 things will equal a faster athlete. Now, if you're looking at research that talks about the angle of release at the knee from frontside to backside mechanics, is it useful? Could be. Is it applicable? Maybe not, right? So it might be research that covers a very finite topic. It might be something that assesses different angles and their interaction with the ground as far as ground force production goes. That's very common in research around speed. It might just be something that's a little further down the line than you may see in your coaching program at the level of athletes that you coach. So it's very important. You should look at what problem was studied and is that problem applicable to your coaching practice? And then number 3, and this is I think the true test of a coach, is does it fit the athlete that's in front of you? Whether it be an individual, small groups, a team, whatever, does it actually match what the athlete needs? Because that is where you as the coach, again, you have to be the decision maker and just to what gets to the athlete, what is filtered to the athlete and is displayed in your coaching practice. So I think that's really important to look at. The next thing to talk about is this idea of the principle, the method, and the tool framework that is used. So what's nice is when you look at the principle level of the study, right? Like, hey, this is what they studied. That allows you to have a lot of flexibility as a coach. Allows you to have a lot of flexibility in a sense of, well, was it relevant, right? What we just talked about, is it applicable? Is it relevant? And 2, it allows you to either zoom in or zoom out with the study. And again, this podcast topic is about translating the science. So what's important is to know what's important and to know when it is going to be important. So for you as the performance coach, if you're looking at a study that says, well, we know that if we can improve thigh angular velocity, we will improve an athlete's speed. Cool. Okay. So now when you see an athlete is doing sprint mechanics and they have something attached to their hips, and it's a parachute or something like that, you can now start to question, well, that parachute is not necessarily dynamic resistance. It's actually pretty wild as far as the velocity or the resistance curve that's being applied, because it's going to change depending on the air, which is dependent on how fast the athlete's going, but it's attached to their hips. And now it's pulling their hips into flexion the whole time. Maybe if it was a shoulder harness, it could be a little bit better, but it allows you to zoom out and say, okay, well, we know that it matters if we increase the velocity of the thigh. So maybe actually instead of adding resistance behind the athlete, we add assistance in front of the athlete, because now that's going to increase angular velocity of the lower body, and it might actually increase stride length, but we want to make sure we prevent overstriding, et cetera, et cetera. But you can see how now we zoom out and we're able to take in a concept from research, but make it a better decision for our training session. So the research might be on the resistance profile added to athletes during 30-yard sprints, right? That was my voice, by the way, of what research could sound like if research could talk. Very proper. But it might be something that now you're able to infer different, or you zoom out, you stay on that principle level and you zoom out, which is a good place to be as a performance coach, because it doesn't necessarily interfere with your coaching practice, but it helps kind of turn the gears a little bit in your brain as far as what could work, what could not work. Because if you're thinking now that you need the tools, right? Oh, well, they have force velocity plates, or this research used this type of resistance specifically, and I don't have that. Well, now you're starting to enter the realm of rigidity, right? You're very rigid of, well, the research says this, and it has to be done with this, and I don't have that, so my employer's trash, and this profession's hard, and it's super inaccessible, and that's not a place you want to be. And that, I laugh because that's a lot where coaches will go and they'll be like, well, I read the research, or this research you shared says that you're using Viper cords, and I saw in the video that you guys posted about resisted sprints, you're using big heavy bands, and I don't have access to those, so I can't do them. And I'm like, well, you're looking at the tool level. Let's zoom out and see, like, okay, well, maybe posterior or anterior loaded resistance assisted the movement, and that is what we're trying to do. So maybe you run down a hill instead of having a band pull you forward or something like that. So it helps you understand concepts, but also if you stay on that flexible level, right, from the principle of like what's happening, it helps you to think conceptually. And I guess that's what I'm trying to say, right? The principle level can help you think conceptually, which I think for a coach gives you the ability to problem solve. And that's really what we want research to do, is help us solve problems, or help us kind of turn the wheels to solve, use it to infer and solve problems that we may see that are not applicable directly to the research, which we talked about that in part 1. I'm not going to go on that rant right now. The other thing that is important about translating science is it's your ability to also talk about it to athletes. And I don't think you need to be the coach that gives them a thesis and regurgitates the research, but I think it really can help show expertise. And what I mean by that is, if you get an inquisitive parent, I'll say that in a nice way, maybe you can read between the lines of that, an inquisitive parent or an inquisitive sport coach that asks a ton of questions. Well, yeah, coach, like I absolutely hear what you're saying, but I've actually, I've got research that has shown that if we do assisted sprinting instead of resisted sprinting, we can actually increase angular velocity of the thigh, which is going to help increase speed. So we're going to spend some time running up hills, and we're going to spend some time running down hills as well. And I'm happy to send you over the research for you to check out as well. So, I think it helps just be the translator, if you will, like let's kind of dumb it down a little bit, just to be the translator from what the research says to why we do what we do. Because a lot of times you might do something, like you might run down a hill, and you might have a coach say like, oh, we've always run up hills, why are we running down them, right? And you might say, well, this is over speed training in its simplest form, and it's what I have available to me in this field right now as I'm training you, and that's what we do. We're going to spend some time today running down the hill, and then our next session we'll spend some time running up the hill, because running down the hill helps increase stride frequency, which we know can improve max velocity. Running up the hill is going to help change our body angle and shin angle, and that's going to help improve acceleration. So 2 different qualities for 2 different things on one hill. And that's now going to be just an easy way to discuss complex training ideas in a simplistic way to the population you work with. And I think that's really important, because if someone asks you why, and you look at them and say, well, this is what we've always done, that's maybe the worst answer you could ever give someone. So I'm not a fan of that, if you could tell. So I think it's important for us as sport coaches to understand so that we can translate in a way that our athletes and sport coaches can follow. And that helps position us as experts, and that can help position us as thought leaders, and at least have the conversation. And if you listen to part 1, I gave an example of how you can use research to have great conversations with different industry leaders, and they'll be well-versed in the research, and you can have those conversations. And it's non-threatening. I mean, that's what the nice thing about research is, like I said, in this whole podcast series, is it's pretty binary, right? It's either this showed it was significant, this showed it was insignificant, and we can have the conversation. We don't have to necessarily have that certainty bias and think that it's the end all be all, but we can say, well, yeah, the research showed this, but when I have the athletes in front of me, or the team in front of me, or I have a team that requires we start here to get there, that's what we do. So it can help really guide the ship, so to speak. And then I think just maybe putting a lovely little bow on this concept of why research happens is it really helps provide balance for us as coaches because, and this is a great example, right? So Parisi has a training certification, right? The Anatomy of Speed, it's our coaching certification. You can take the coaching certification and it's going to show you the end result, right? Because what Parisi has done, what Bill Parisi has done, the education team has taken research, has taken 30 years of coaching tangible experiences and mushed them together to produce the certification. And a lot of training certifications and training systems operate in this way. So you're, as the consumer, as the coach, interested and curious, is going to see the end result. But now we go, well, why does the wall drive work really well? Or why do we break multi-directional speed up into change of direction and maneuverability and agility? And how do we work athletes from a scripted to reactive position in agility? Well, now we have research, or we have an interest and curiosity in the research, right? So you're kind of getting the end user, the exposure. Oh, this is why we do it like this. So this is when we do this cue, or when we do this activity, or when we do break it up into this genre or discipline. It's because we are being mindful of X, Y, and Z over here on the research side. So it can spark the curiosity that will get you into the research, that will then help you understand it on a further level to have the conversation. So it's almost you can't put the cart before the horse, but in sport performance coaching, it's been an industry for a long time. We can put the cart before the horse, right? You can have the cart and now you can go back and understand why you need the horse to pull it. I'm not sure if that is exactly how that analogy works, but we're going to run with it. So the idea of research, I think that, again, it's very scary if someone is, I'm an evidence-based coaching, or if someone is like, well, the evidence isn't actually practical. It's not something you can actually take into the coaching session. Both of those coaches are very scary to me. And I think it's really important that we respect both. Those both work collaboratively to make some awesome coaches, and having strong practical components and then having a curiosity can help spark interest into the research side of things, because research definitely helps inform coaching, right? I think that's probably the most simplistic way to say it. Your research is going to inform your coaching, and then when we can translate it, we can have better conversations. We can then evolve our coaching practice. And then as new research comes out, it just allows us to look at what we're doing, right? We can look over here. This is what I'm doing with the population that I work with and the genre that I teach. And then we can say, okay, well, new research is telling me that this is actually going to be super beneficial to prevent hamstring soft tissue issues. Well, now maybe I can take that practical component and I can put it into my coaching practice in the prep work here. Or I can actually take that, it's pretty low impact. I can actually maybe add that as my finisher down here. Maybe I can micro dose it as a filler movement or active recovery within this application that these athletes are doing on max velocity days, right? So it allows you to enhance your coaching because you're aware of it. So all in all, it was a great question asked in All Access. Hey, what's up with these research reviews? Why should I read them? Because you have a whole bunch of them in All Access. We publish 2 every month. Shameless plug, but not that shameless because this is the Parisi Podcast. But say, hey, coach, it's important, and here's the reason why. I thought it was a great topic. I wanted to break it up into 2 shorter podcasts that really covered why it's important, right? Like how to understand the research, and then like translating the research and actually kind of applying it in conversation. So the research. And again, in the comments, whether you're listening on Spotify, if you're listening through Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts, or if you're on YouTube, throw your questions in the comments, because these are how we get the content ideas for podcasts, for our master classes, for All Access, whether it be Coach's Eye or Assessing Correct. These are the things that we want. These are living content avenues for us. We want to be answering the questions that coaches have and that we can provide our 2 cents on, right? On the Parisi side of things, on this methodology. So it's not to say it's the end all be all, but it is just here to, again, spark your curiosity, just like we talked about with the research. So I hope you found this beneficial. Thank you so much for signing in this week. I will catch you all next week on the latest episode of the Parisi Podcast. Take it easy.